Welcome to Front Row Seat, conversations of encouragement for pastors' wives by pastors' wives. Kristen, that really has been our goal this whole series. It's been encouragement from the topics that we came up with and the questions that we asked to the people we invited to be our guests here with us. You know, we really wanted our listeners to be encouraged. And you and I talked, and one voice that we need to and want to join this conversation of encouragement for pastors' wives is the voice of the pastor. Mm-hmm. For the pastor to speak in to this conversation was so important to us. And who better for us to ask to join us on our show here, but our own husbands, Tom and Brad. Welcome to Front Row Seat. We're so happy to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, typically we have our guests introduce themselves and tell a little bit about where their ministry is and maybe a little bit about their family. And so we'd love for you guys to do that. Just introduce yourselves a little bit and maybe add how you met your amazing pastors' wives.
Yeah, I can kick us off. So I'm Tom. Mm-hmm. I'm married to Kari. Yep. We have three kiddos, Kari, Tovi, and Tommy, 16, 14, 11, mm-hmm. 2 girls and a boy. Yeah, and right now I serve as pastor of the Orchard in Barrington, the Orchard Evangelical Free Church in Barrington. We're a multi-site church, so I lead one of the congregations. You're going to hear a repeat of that in just a second, I think. But been in this role for about 10 years, been on staff mm-hmm. at the church for about 15 years now, actually over 15 years. Yeah. But in this particular role for 10 years. And yeah, we met at Wheaton College mm-hmm. during our junior year. I think I was singing at the talent show, and I like to think you took notice of me, but it probably at the end of the day was the other way around. And I kept asking you out. You said no a couple times because you were busy. I was busy. But then finally you said yes.
I did.
We were off to the races.
And you know what I remember about us dating at Wheaton and starting to fall in love. And I remember you saying, I'm called to be a pastor. I want to be a pastor. And I was like, that's going to be so amazing for you. That is just going to be so great for you. And, I never felt necessarily a calling to ministry as a pastor's wife specifically, but I always knew I would be a part of the local church.
Well, and I don't want to steal the thunder from where we're going, but I do think that in talking about how we met, I remember, I don't know who got at me on this very early in my life when I was a kid. Uh-huh. But, that was really the saying that I remember replying to you is, you don't have to feel called to be a pastor's wife. Just are you called, beloved, and kept? Like Jude says, are you called, beloved, mm-hmm. and kept by Jesus? Are you called to live a faithful Christian life? I wasn't looking for a woman who was called to be a pastor's wife. I was looking for a woman who's called to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. So Brad, what about you? What's your story?
Well, I'm also a pastor at the Orchard. I serve at our Arlington Heights location, where Tom and I first met. That was your question, right? Where did Tom and I first meet?
Yeah. What qualities did you love in Tom?
No, but my first job at our church was serving as Tom's intern. So that's my beginnings. And but love serving our church. And I always tell the story of when we met. So I think you should tell it, and then I can see if I want to fill anything in.
You can see it. Yeah, you can see if you want to correct it, because that sometimes happens, right? Well, fun fact about the four of us is Tom officiated our wedding, mm-hmm. and you both did our premarital counseling. So that's been a really fun part of our journey together. Yeah. About 10 years ago, exactly, actually, I came to the Orchard, and the Lord brought me here, and I was employed as the assistant director of children's ministries, and Brad just happened to be on staff as well. Were you the high school and middle school pastor at that point?
Ministries, yep.
Yeah. So he asked me on a date. This is where the contention comes in, because he has a different side to that story. But he asked me on a date, and the rest is history.
Except she asked me on a date. That's how it started. If I don't know what, or do you want to go out to lunch with me is, other than maybe, our first date, but it's okay. We don't need to hash that all out
That's
right
a
now.
side conversation.
But
I will pitch in here though. I also remember how you guys met, kind of, because Kristen was introduced at a staff meeting and Brad and I were hanging out that night, and I was about to ask him, so what'd you think of Kristen? And Brad just goes, I already like her. I already want to ask her out. Don't ask me any more questions.
I forgot about that.
It all worked out great.
It all did. It did. And see where the Lord has brought you guys, see where the Lord has brought us. And we're really so thankful to be serving together alongside with you here in this, at this church in the Chicagoland area. So we have two pastors with us, so we're gonna pepper you guys with some questions here about pastors' wives. Think back to seminary. All the way back to seminary for you is about 18 years ago. What about for you, Brad?
Wow. 8 years ago now, I think.
Okay.
I finished up 7, 8, yeah.
7, 8. So while in seminary, I know you didn't take a pastor's wives 101 class, but did they talk about wives, marriage, and ministry at all? What do you remember from seminary in the way that they prepared you?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to seminary, I just remember discussion that it can be hard for a pastor's wife. So kind of getting us tuned into that. And, there's a quote that pretty much every pastor at our church quotes all the time, from Robert Murray McShane, who said the greatest need of my people as their pastor is my own personal holiness, just talking the overflow of your own walk with Jesus into pastoral ministry. And I remember the same mentality being like, kind of riffing off that quote, the mentality I got from seminary was a lot of what my people need, or what your people are needing, is for you to be cultivating a healthy marriage. And so I felt like we got a lot of advice to really make sure we were cultivating a healthy marriage. I don't know if anybody ever sat me down and said that, but that was definitely the ethos of the way our school, I felt like, was pouring into us at that time.
Yeah, the unique thing for me is I was in seminary for 5 years because I got a year and a half in full-time school and then started full-time at our church. So I had to go part-time route the rest of the way. But for the first 4 of those 5 years, I was not married. And so I'm sure there was lots of good advice or lots of wise words being shared. And I just wasn't listening. I think my focus was more on, Lord, I would love to find a wife. And, but I think even that, in talking with some wise mentors and others ahead of me, just affirming that as a very good desire and praying for me specifically, Lord, give him not just a wife, but a partner in ministry. And I think, Tom, we need to come back and keep hashing out what you rightly said earlier, just looking for someone called to serve Christ and follow him. But there is that certain need in pastoral ministry to have a partner by your side who's supportive and is with you. And I'm so glad people prayed that for me, and God answered that prayer.
That's so good. There was one piece of advice that really stuck out to me that you got.
Oh yeah, and that was actually from my mentor in college.
Oh, it was from a mentor in college.
Who said, don't leave your wife behind. He's like, you're going to go on this theological journey in seminary, but I really extrapolated it off of seminary too. So he was like, share with your wife what you're learning. So you're not like diving into just the glories of doctrine, but not like bringing your wife with you along on that journey. And that didn't mean me like going home and repeating lectures, but just like sharing a nugget of a truth that excited me. But I think that also had the ripple effect when we were in seminary we invested in a small group at church. Rather than investing just in some buddies at seminary. Because I had a buddy who went through seminary and did leave his wife behind, and he made all these friends at seminary, and his wife just kind of felt in a lurch. So kind of actually between that buddy, but then that mentor in college, they were like, just really, really dial in your focus on making sure your wife feels a part of your life.
Yeah.
Which I think we've tried to continue to this day, because you're having these intensive conversations with people, whether in pastoral counseling or whether with the board about the vision of the church. And you're having a lot of intense conversations that are very meaningful to you, not just personally, but vocationally and spiritually.
Right.
And if you're not finding ways to involve your wife in that, you kind of leave her in the dust.
Yeah.
And you get that situation where she becomes the last person to know about what's happening at church. And people are like, hey, Kari, what's going on at the church? And she's like, I don't know, because
I've done that.
I told everybody but you, know, so.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, Tom and Brad, because I think that a pastor's wife could also become too involved, right? So you have these extremes where you perhaps, end up leaving her behind and doesn't feel like she's enough involved. And then you have over involvement. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What does that look like to strike that right balance?
I'd love it if I knew exactly what it looked like to strike the right balance every time. But I can say without being specific at all and talking about points where we've discussed, like, hey, this doesn't seem good. I do think there can be an oversharing and an dependence upon your spouse as the person to process everything with, when really I want to be careful because I want you to love the church, and you don't need to know every challenge and every difficulty. And even though I know you want to support me and you want to know when I'm having a hard day or when things are going in a way that is particularly challenging to me, you don't need to know all the details of what it may be. And so I think at times perhaps it would be an undershare to come home and say, how was the day at church? How are things going? And say, oh, it's fine, it's great, and say nothing. It could be an overshare to say, well, let me tell you exactly the problem I've had today and with whom I've had that problem. Right. And then I'm coloring your vision of our church in a way that's not necessary. I want you to love the church. And that'd be one thought.
That's good.
I agree with everything Brad said. I would also add, I think there's seasons of life to that. When we had real little kids, it's just not practical for us both to be involved in the life of the church in the same way as now that we have teenagers and our kids can brush their own teeth and put themselves to bed. And even right now, our oldest is going to pick up everybody from Awana and take them home, so there's just an opportunity. But I would say you got to find the right dynamic. One story that comes to mind on this question is when I was a high school pastor, and we just had our second. So we had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we were just not finding the right blend. And it was actually Kari jumping in and leading a high school girls small group, which felt like a weird thing to add in that season. But even though we weren't doing the same thing at the same time, we were still pulling in the same direction in ministry. And it really settled something for us on that point. And so Kari was in the ministry and was able to see a little bit, to Brad's point, why I might be stressed, even if she didn't have all the details. And I could also see her owning some of those. And so I felt like I had a partner. So but again, we haven't always gotten to do that, but I think we have tried to find, at least if you can find one small way you're kind of tugging in the same direction in the same ministry, it just gives you a bit more understanding with each other. And then if I do need to say, hey, I'm tied up and I got to go out for a meeting tonight because of this situation, it's just like she implicitly had some more understanding, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, that kind of brought you in too a little bit to say, like, this is a joint, a value for us to have me involved in the youth ministry at that time, which also meant it was our job to find a babysitter, our job to, to make sure the kids are taken care of. And so it was just a little more togetherness. And I mean, you led the way in that. I was like, are you kidding me? Leading a small group right now, that's so difficult.
Yeah, and I think I raised that. I'm not trying to provide some cure-all there, but I think Brad's point is so wise on it's hard to strike the right balance. And I think my point in raising that story is sometimes you do have to back off and say, the season in our family right now, we both got to dial it back, or one of us needs to dial it back. But I think there's other times where you actually got to turn up the volume on your serving, because it creates more mission, vision, purpose for you to kind of align around in your marriage, and make you feel like ministry isn't the pastor's job, but not the wife's job. And again, I'm not creating some expectation here where the pastor's wife has to be the church choir director or anything like that, which was some of the stuff I grew up around back when I was a boy, with like that kind of goofy expectation. I just mean, sometimes I think the answer is always in doing less, but occasionally it can be, hey, we should be partnering more together as husband and wife in ministry.
And whether it's more together, like you guys just shared in that story, or I think two questions maybe you could just simply ask are we both using the gifts that God has given us to serve the church? So are you getting to do the things that the Lord has gifted you to do to serve the church? If not, how can we find a way for you to do that? And then are we supporting each other in it? So maybe that means we're in the same exact ministry, leading together, or it's, hey, I'm so glad you're out doing that right now, and I'm going to watch the kids and support you to go do the work that God's equipped you to do right now. So are we using our gifts to serve the church? Are we supporting each other?
That's such a good point, because I don't think it benefits either one of us if we are like, play the victim, oh, you've got all of that to do, and then he's like, oh, she's too busy at home, she can't be involved in church, like either we play the victim or we be the savior and, like kind of protect each other. But striking that balance.
And that's something where some of the leaders over Brad and I at the Orchard have set a good tone too. I mean, they've actually encouraged us. I remember one specific instance last year where a bunch of new residents and interns at our church, and my boss was like, you should send Kari.
Oh yeah.
Like, let her invest in people that night and you stay home with the kids. And so he saw me like deploying you as like, he didn't see that as a problem, but as a benefit. So we've had some good leadership to learn from here too, which we're grateful for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, here on Front Row Seat, it was all about the pastor's wife's perspective, talking about our challenges and encouragements and all of that stuff. So I kind of want to hear from you guys as pastors then. Would you tell us a story? Tell us about a time that you were challenged. It felt like a challenge to faithfully honor the Lord and the work he's called you to do, but also the home that he has called you to lead. There's a tug and pull, and we keep saying balance, but we've said this before, that implies we have some sort of control, which we know we don't. But tell us a story about that. Give us some insight.
Well, this morning at our house, what do you do when it's Tuesday and it's the start of your busy week and the calendar's full and the task list is full and one or two of your children wake up sick and your pregnant wife didn't sleep really well at all last night and everything at home looks like this is like raise the white flag, surrender, I need you to stay. And you're looking at the task list and you're like, well, I have to go. And I think this morning was another reminder that we have to talk and we have to sometimes compromise even on, okay, what do I feel like I need right now? What do you feel like you need right now? How do we serve each other? How do we help? And today that just meant flipping our schedules around a little bit in unexpected ways, but trying to just say, hey, what would it take for you to make it through this day and vice versa? So today it happened when you wake up and it's just not the day you planned. So that happens. A bigger moment for us, I was thinking about this recently, was the last time we moved, because that's not a day, that's like a season of challenge and change. And the move took us further away. The church is further away from the home all of the sudden. Before we moved, we had a newborn in the house, and pretty much everything felt like too much and overwhelming in a day-to-day. And once again, though, I mean, you can tell me, I think it was just communicating, like, how can we do this and how can we do it well together, and understanding that ministry, the church, needs to be served, and our home, our wives, our families need to be served, and it's not an either or. You've got to figure out how to make it work. And so I don't know if you remember anything from that season that was particularly helpful, but
Yeah, I don't remember a lot. It was
maybe we made it.
we made it. We made it.
Foggy.
Yeah, no, I just remember being so acutely aware of my dependence on the Lord.
Yeah.
And of my weakness, which, like we were saying this morning, is true all the time. And yet we walk through days or seasons where we're more aware that it's true, right? That is our reality. And so I think even just from a spiritual standpoint, just approaching the Lord that way, and then approaching one another that way, and saying, I can't be strong all the time. You know, I really do need your help in such and such a way. And I don't know if you struggle with this, Kari, but I think sometimes for wives, asking for help can be hard. Because we so badly want to free you guys up for the work that God has called you to do. We want to be good moms, we want to press on and push forward. So asking for help can be hard, but I actually think it can be a great kindness to our husbands to just be clear and ask for help. And if they can't help, they can't help, and they'll tell us. But most of the time it's yes, it's just figuring out how.
Yeah.
And my last little thought on that is, I think just communicating to each other, like, hey, I know why this is hard for you. Like, if you're home today with the kids and the way things are, I know that's going to be really hard. And for you to say, hey, and if you can't go in today and your schedule gets all messed up, I know that's going to be really hard. And just acknowledging, like, this is difficult for both of us. Let's figure it out.
Right.
Empathizing, understanding. That's been good.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I'm eager to jump in on this as well. I do remember having at one point, probably 5 or 6 years into pastoral ministry, realizing that I had to take a clean break from email on my day off. And along with that, actually delete the email app from my phone on my days off. Because a great piece of counsel I heard from Pastor Tom Nelson down in Kansas City at a men's event one time was, he said, everybody's working for balance, but sometimes it's better to think of life as engage, disengage. And so when I leave church, I'm disengaging in church and I'm engaging with my family, and they're getting my focus and attention. And so I do think there's something to that, where if my family has my focus and attention, and they're used to, when I come home, getting my focus and attention, then when you do say I have to step away for a work thing, it's less jarring. Because you've been giving them your attention and they're used to getting it from you, versus if your phone's always in your email and you keep working when you're home. They're like, well, when does it end?
Right.
And it feels like a hopeless situation for your family. So
you.
Yeah. And you as well. Yeah. And again, I please know I'm not speaking on a pedestal from that, far from it. I feel like I sometimes come home a zombie and it takes me like 30 minutes. And if anybody talks to me in the first 30 minutes of walking through the door, I can't physically process what they're saying. So I don't necessarily speak of that from strength, but that's what I aspire to, I guess I'd say. And just to pitch in on that too, I just say to any brother pastors who are listening, it's so important to keep taking your wife on dates, because you both are so busy, especially if you're in a season with young kids. And if you don't create that intentional space, and it doesn't have to be expensive, it can just be a cup of coffee, but there's something about getting out of the house, just the two of you, and the work it takes, especially if you have kids, to get out of the house, just the two of you, and to say, we're going to spend this time focused on each other. It really just raises conversation. You build understanding. And so when you're putting that much investment in your relational bank when one of you has to say, I need you to stay home today, honey.
Yeah.
Or I know I'm missing this band concert tonight, but I can't. That's our recent one. But, you know, but I can't break this commitment I have tonight.
Yeah.
You've got to have some relational deposits in the bank stored up if you're going to make those kind of withdrawals.
Yeah. Which still doesn't make it easy, actually. It still means I'm talking to myself and to have a gospel-centered, perspective of the situation, and Tom, and he's talking to himself as well, and so it doesn't make it easy, but communication, oh man, it really, really does smooth some of those edges of the rough edges of the pull, the challenge. Because, if we feel it as pastors' wives, the challenge of church life and home life and what we want from him, and do have to remember, like you were saying, Brad, he feels it. He feels it too. He really does. And so that acknowledgement has really gone very far, I think, whenever, we've done anything like that acknowledging, hey, thank you. Thank you for doing this for me today. Or, thanks for moving your schedule around. That meant so much to me. I needed that. And that's been helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm sorry go a long way. Those aren't
That is so true.
Those aren't like simple things. Those are like foundational building blocks for a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm almost 100% sure that you said that to us during premarital counseling.
Oh.
It's
Consistency.
true.
Well, marriage is made to
It's
reflect
true.
the gospel, so
Yeah, true.
there better be some I'm sorries and forgive yous if it's marriage is going to reflect a relationship to Christ.
No, that's right. Well, and I think another important deposit we make in our marriages is praying for one another. We've talked with several of our guests about the importance of, praying for our husbands, and not only for their hearts, for their work, for our own hearts, for our own calling and work for the Lord. But how would you guys encourage pastors to be praying for their wives? How do you personally pray for us?
Well, this goes back to what I said at the beginning, so I won't belabor it. But I primarily, it's just to pray that she'd love Jesus, because if our tanks are both filled up that way, and he's setting our course and priorities, a lot of the hardships that come with being a pastor's family will have that that Christ-centered perspective. So praying for that, and then. Too, I think of I think it's Psalm 16:3. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. And I just pray, frankly, for both of us that we would think of our church and be like, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. So I tend not to make that prayer too hard. I'm just praying that we'd believe the gospel, that we'd love Jesus, that we'd love the people he's put in our life right before us.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Just to piggyback off that, one of the verses I prayed for you and for our family consistently is 1 Thessalonians 3, verse 8, which is exactly what you're saying, Tom. Paul just says, for now we live if what? So I'm living if this is happening. What is it? He says, if you are standing fast in the Lord. And so it's like, all right, I'm good today. And he just talked in the previous verse, it's distress and affliction and all this stuff's going on. He's like, but I'm living if you're standing fast in the Lord, and to know that whatever you're dealing with in a given day, and by that I mean you or me, if we're standing fast in the Lord, we're gonna be all right. We're gonna be good. And so if it's a busy day with the kids or a stressful situation or some sorrow or whatever it may be, when I see your faith, I'm encouraged. And so I'm praying for that and just praying, Lord, strengthen her faith in you. Help her stand fast in you today, and we'll be good. We'll be good.
I love that. That's so true. So this is your chance to encourage. Say what?
One shot.
Yeah. What would you say then to a pastor's wife young or seasoned, what would you say to encourage a pastor's wife who is listening? And what would you say to encourage a pastor who may be listening?
I've already given my one to the guys. Take your wife out. Ask her out.
There you go.
All right.
Make sure she knows that you are that she is the apple of your eye.
Yeah.
You know, that you're thinking of her like the groom thinks of the bride in Song of Songs. You know, like I just can't tell you that enough, men. It will have such a ripple effect in your life in so many ways if you just keep prioritizing one-on-one time with her. You know, and I heard it, once said about sabbaticals, every week take a day, every year take a week, every 7 years take a few weeks or something like that. I don't know, some pithy thing I heard in seminary, but I think of the same kind of with your wife too. Try to get her out, get your attention on her in some way, shape, or form once a week, some kind of intentional thing with her. But once a year, I hope you've got at least an overnight somewhere where you're really just focused on each other for at least like 36 hours. And I hope every couple of years you're getting 4 or 5 days away, just the two of you, So like, that's my thing to guys. I'm just a broken record on guys. If you get two people who love Jesus, who are getting time together, they're just going to intuitively have good conversations if they're making time for each other and getting at the heart of the matter. I think for the wives, I would just say you're making so much more of an impact than you realize. Like, even if you just name your podcast, sit in the front row and genuinely worship Jesus. We're just in a season right now where it's interesting. Like, that's what people have picked up on in our congregation. They're just like, you guys are just worshiping Jesus as a family in the front row. And it's like, just the domino effect of that into every conversation and relationship. So I know for a lot of pastors' wives, and again, we're just coming out of that season where really you were really zeroed in on the kids and home. But again, people just even love seeing that, and they love seeing that intentionality. So wives, even just your presence of worshiping Jesus and being happy to show up to small group and study the Bible, even if you're not the leader, but you're just glad to be there. Like, that's going to have so much more of an effect, because people are just wondering if the pastor's family really believes it. And so if you just worship Jesus and, just love the word, like that's going to have such an impact more than you realize.
That's good.
That's
a
good.
Word.
That's good. Yeah, I don't know. I think for the husbands, there's like a fairly short list of things that we absolutely must do if we're going to be faithful, and loving our wives is one of them. And so it sounds so obvious when you say that, but do it. Like I love what you just said, Tom, and the time and the time for fun and the time for intentionality as well. One thing maybe is, whatever is you at your best in pastoral care, are you giving that level of like interest and support and care for your wife as well? Or, don't give the leftovers, and don't clock out on intentionally asking questions and listening and praying that you do for your people. Do that for your wife at home as well. So just love your wife. We have to, and it's such a good thing. Amen. And it will turn your home into a kind of sanctuary, right? That you come into with great joy and delight to be there, because you've fostered something in your marriage that's really, really rich and really, really good. And I agree with you, Tom, on the wives, pastors' wives. You're doing much more than you may realize. And I don't think you know how far your words go in our hearts and in our lives. Tom, you and I have talked about this, but it's really wonderfully encouraging to hear good feedback from a sermon. It's great to know you've helped people at church. I'm just take preaching, for example, to come home and to hear from you about how that helped or how that was encouraging, or and not nothing for, the sake of flattery or making things up, but genuinely like, this helped me today. That's the most encouraging word I can get after a sermon. And I think for pastors' wives, just to remember your words of encouragement will go really, really far for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like that was one thing that dawned on me, I think, after becoming a pastor. Like, Kari she now is primarily has to listen to my preaching the rest of her life. And so there is that heart. I feel that, Brad. I'm like, I hope she likes my preaching. I hope she's blessed by it and feels encouraged and fed by it, because she's got, by God's grace, like 40 more years of it.
Yeah, we're hopeful for 40 more years. No, but that is a precious thing to sit under the teaching of my husband, but to feel the stirring of the Holy Spirit and to feel God's word come alive in a way that I had never considered before or, explained before. Really being taught by him it's just a precious, precious thing. So thank you for saying that, you guys, that we want to be encouragers to you and faithful in our words to you. And it's not easy sometimes. I mean, it just isn't. It's, where I get hyper focused on me, and that's not how God wants me to live. And so to give us a partner, like you said, Brad, that wonderful gift of a partner in ministry, just helps us get our focus on him, on you. That's good.
It does. Yeah. And it makes me think too, the power of words. We've talked about the power of prayer, words in prayer. I'll just share a brief story, but I pray often that that God's word would powerfully go out through Brad, as well as the other campus pastors. And we heard testimonies at baptisms on Sunday evening this past week. And a gentleman got up and shared that what really hit him at one moment was a sermon that Pastor Brad was preaching. And I just started bawling because it occurred to me, like, Lord, this is an answer to my prayers.
Yeah.
And we don't hear these things, I would say, often. Yeah. But God is bearing fruit. Yeah. These prayers, these words, they matter deeply. So to hear that was deeply encouraging. Wow. And we're so grateful for both of you. Yeah. We're so grateful for God's ministry through you. We're privileged to walk alongside of you as our husbands, and
vice versa.
And it has been fun to walk together. That is for certain. So, well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Front Row Seat. And to our sisters who are watching, God sees you. He sees your husband as well. And you can trust that he has good things in store for you both. So thanks for joining us today.